Seems to be the case. Fantastic. Yeah, so we would like to now dive a bit more into strengthening synergies between sustainable transport and climate action. A lot has been said in this first panel, and I think that what we would love to do in the next one is perhaps to go even a bit more into how we make it happen. It's fantastic, isn't it, when we have global frameworks, and then we need to get from those global frameworks to the action that occurs at the national and at the subnational level. And we know that there is an effort of translation and an effort of contextualization that is always very much needed. And a lot was said already about how do we need different ministries working together, how do we need different levels of government working together, how do we need the right type of data, the right type of monitoring and verification. So this is the kind of conversation that we're also going to have in our second panel. I would think that it's very much about that knowledge, policy, practice continuum that we want to generate, and that is not a given, that is not necessarily a given. In order to discuss this with me, because there is a mainstream, let me just introduce myself again. My name is Marucha Cardama. I'm with SLOCAT, the Sustainable Low Carbon Transport Partnership, and it's fantastic to be once more in this SDG pavilion in one more COP, in COP Belém this year, and having a dedicated morning to transport was such a momentous occasion as the eve of the United Nations Decade of Sustainable Transport, the first ever. I am extremely honored to introduce the panel, and I would ask you to join us here on stage and leave just one seat, the last one for me. So perhaps we can, the first speaker sits here and we go one after the other. So with us today, Thiago Casagrande, who is a senior analyst in the Ministry of Transport of Brazil. We have as well with us Jason Paniu, who is in the Climate Change and Development Authority, particularly working on MRB and communications in Papua New Guinea. Thank you very much for bringing such a relevant perspective here. We have as well with us Mr. Mark Meyer, who is Senior Director for Strategy in the Q&A Climate Center. Clarissa Linke, who is the Executive Country Director, Brazil Country Director in the Institute for Transport and Development Policy, ITDP. And last but not least, we have with us Bin Adhikari, who is Senior Program Specialist in Canada's International Development Research Center. Welcome all of you very much, and please comfortably take your seats, make yourselves comfortable, and I will stay here. Now I realize that I was not even counting the chairs. Perfectly fine. No, I can actually make contact with you, eye contact with you. This is very much what it's all about. A technical question. If I move, I get out of the frame. Can I move to our... No. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. I appreciate it. So, no, it's okay. No worries. So, a first question that I would like to share, to hear from our speakers, and I would like to, if you allow me, or the panelists, to start perhaps with Thiago and with Jason. We talk a lot about national leadership and the importance of it, and of course we need national governments to help us set a vision and align the incentives and bring the stakeholders together. But that is not an easy thing to do, isn't it? So how do you think that national leadership and that cross-sectoral, cross-departmental collaboration can be enhanced in order to strengthen this very powerful linkage that we want to see between sustainability and climate action in transport? So perhaps Thiago starts, and then we move to Jason, and then I would of course go to the other fellow panelists. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank SCAP, SLOCAT, and UN DESA for inviting us for this panel, and welcome all to Brazil. I'm very happy to be here at COP30 with everyone from all around the world. Yes, national government is the primary responsible for policies. There's no other way. We have to regulate the sector. We have to have guidelines, framework. And I would like to talk a little bit about Brazil, how we are doing it, about climate change here. We have our national policy for climate change and national climate plans. So we have the for mitigation and for resilience, for adaptation, and for all of the sectors, one of them including the transport sector. So we finished, it will be published right after COP, our national climate plans. And yeah, but as Marusha mentioned, the government regulates the sector, but we cannot do everything by ourselves. It's impossible. We need all of the stakeholders, the manufacturers, the consumers, the private sectors. We need the people, as mentioned in other panel. We need the people to buy the idea. We need the people to have to be on the climate plan. And talking about people, we have to remember that transport, the reason for transport existing is the people, is the people use it, and we have the goods transporting all around for the people, right? So the main reason for us to be here is because people need transport. And when we talk about climate change in transport, we cannot leave it behind the climate impacts. We have all around the world the climate impacts disrupting the transport system. We had recently in Paraná, a few weeks ago, we see a typhoon disrupting an entire city. We had last year major floods that never occurred in Brazil, on south of Brazil. So this is life disruption, right? Not only transport, but transport is the one of the first to be disrupted. So people cannot do anything with their life. So that's why we have to have actions for mitigations, but not only. We need urgent actions for adaptation, for resilience, right? So and we have UN DESA Decade for Sustainable Transport. We have 6 strategic pillars, right? Equitable access, low carbon and resilience, logistic efficiency, people-centered urban mobility, safe and secure transport, science, technology, and innovation. And for me, all of these axis strategic pillars are linked to climate change, all of them in different levels. So that's why the importance to have this discussion here at COP, linking COP30 and climate change to the UN Decade for Sustainable Transport. And to finalize, national governments have to be the main leaders for climate action, because it affects everyone in the country. But we have to push forward the policies, the regulations, the ambitions. But we need everyone. We need all the sectors to go behind us and actually make the plans, the actions, the ambitions happen.
Thank you very much, Iago, for that call for partnerships and for that very, very highlighted lens on resilience, and how at the end of the day it's not just the resilience of a transport system, but is the day-to-day life of people and the day-to-day life of businesses as well that gets impacted when transport systems are not there anymore. Jason, I'm sure that this speaks levels to you, isn't it, in Papua New Guinea? So give us your take on how national governments can actually strengthen that link between climate and sustainability in the transport sector.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for inviting us to come share our experience or opinions on how we can improve in implementing sustainable transport. Onto your question, I think for us in terms of how the national government can play a key role in this area, I think it's more to do with coordination, enhancing coordination at the national level. Right now, all government agencies or ministries are working in silos, and then it's a bit difficult to coordinate or synergize some of these actions synergize some of the policies. So I think the first step is to establish a working committee specifically for sustainable transport. Now, in this working committee include all the key stakeholders, key ministries. Now, not just the technical from climate change or transport, but now bring in the finance ministry, because they are the key ones that also have to understand these issues before we incorporate into budget or budgetary process, physical policies, they all have to be informed, part of this committee. And more importantly, also is to include the private sector. I mean, they're the ones that they're going to be really pushing from the private sector perspective. Sometimes they don't really understand these issues, climate change issues, and then that's why they don't implement in their own sectors. I think once we've established that, I think the second step is to provide capacity building. Capacity building for these key agencies, getting them to understand climate goals, climate actions, SDG indicators. Once they understand it, understand these SDGs and climate change actions, then they can incorporate into their own work plans. For the private sector, also incorporate this into the budgetary process. Yeah, I think that's what I can share. Because from experience, once these people don't understand, we're just not making progress. We can make progress once these other agencies all understand all these issues. Yeah, probably I can stop from there because others have already touched on most of the areas that I wanted to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. But it's fantastic to hear it directly from you as well, because it's something that resonates across different countries, clearly. Very impressive to know that you are operating already with working committees and with that approach of a multi-sectoral or all the whole of government. I think you used, Lucy, for an expression, isn't it, approach that it's very easily said, but on the day-to-day life of any government is not necessarily an easy thing to put in motion. I would like to turn now to Clarice and to Bim. Technical capacity came up, mentioned by both Jason and Thiago. Monitoring, reporting, verification, that is quite a difficult thing to do as well. Data not always available, not always directly handled by the governments themselves, not always public, not standardized, no capacity necessarily to read what that data is saying. What are some best practices that you have seen operating across the different geographies, particularly here in Brazil with the work that ITDP is doing, and of course the global work in different low and middle income countries that Canada's IDRC is doing? Can you tell us a bit? And any of you can start. Just say.
Okay, so I will start. Okay, great. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's a pleasure. And I'm very happy that I'm sharing a panel with a Brazilian colleague. I am from Brazil, and I welcome you all to our country. Finally, you're coming to us rather than us going to meet you guys. So I think I just want to start thinking about best practices, also highlighting this big push that is being put on the table for the roadmap to phase out fossil fuels by President Lula. And I think this has a lot of potential to really be picked up by other leaders as well at this point. So I think all the practices that we have on the ground, I still not taking that into account, but we would need to fix it to ensure that we can really see a roadmap on the way, right? And I think also another point that the COP30 is also showing us, and maybe we should be more in the green zone to see that coming, is the bottom-up demand for climate justice and adaptation. So I think the adaptation topic is really central to the debate. We had this cyclone a couple of weeks ago. We have been having big floods. So the extreme events have a very big impact in urban mobility infrastructure. In Brazil, we have the National Urban Mobility Law, and then there is the need for the cities to have their mobility plans. They are still municipal level mobility plans, but there are the opportunities to have consortium, so more than one municipality involved, in particular because mobility really happens in the metropolitan scale. And what we have seen is that there has been already an advance towards looking at the mobility plans with a very strong land use lens, and I think this is already an advance, but we have not yet incorporated the vulnerability to climate events into our mobility plans. So ITDP has just revised or updated what we call the Index for Urban Mobility Systems Vulnerability in Brazil, anyway, IVMU, with data from 2025. So we were looking at 21 metropolitan areas and trying to understand where are the metropolitan areas and the cities that are more vulnerable to climate events, to extreme heat, to heat waves, to change in the average along the year of the climate, 32 degrees, and flood and change in precipitation. And then we have very clear that cities and metropolitan areas in the north and the northeast of the country, they are much more vulnerable. This is where we have the poorest population. This is where government doesn't have capacity, adaptive capacity. We have many issues. We don't have a diversity of urban mobility systems on the ground. So there is more precariousness in the urban mobility, in the travel pattern daily. In the south and the southwest, we have more, it varies a lot. So for example, Rio de Janeiro is extremely vulnerable, as well as the metropolitan area of Recife. So I think looking at the vulnerability will help us to understand also where we should be prioritizing our investments. So investments in public infrastructure, in transport infrastructure that have a very strong mitigation focus, but also our adaptation strategies. This new infrastructure that we are planning for the whole country, it has to be green, it has to have nature-based solutions, so we combine, it's a smart investment. I think we are still not there, but we have the framework to incorporate this knowledge into our mobility plans. I think this is one important topic and an important opportunity for us to have smarter investment. I think just the second point is to design proper data quality management systems between the local level and the federal level. Tiago mentioned the Plano Clima, the climate plan. We have also the National Urban Mobility Plan. But we have more than 5,000 cities in Brazil. They are very different in terms of typology, in terms of capacity. We have cities that the city hall doesn't even have, proper computer or has one engineer. So how do we ensure we have all this data flowing that will really help us have appropriate, accurate tracking systems to our mitigation efforts? ITDP has been doing a lot of work with IKI funding, it's called Access, is a big initiative for Latin America that is looking at digitalization to help decarbonization on public transport. So basically, we are trying to identify all different digital solutions, digital tools that can be really useful, but that can strengthen government's capacity. So it's not about talking about the private sector having, all the knowledge and all the access to data and not sharing properly. So it's strengthening government's capacity and civil society capacity as well, and engagement to really feed into this process. So we need to have proper data collection and then later proper data analysis and proper data usage, but with a shared vision. So I think I just would like to close this by saying the reality we have in Brazil now is the majority of poor women living in the peripheries, they are leaving the public transport and they are moving towards motorbike apps, Uber Motos, okay? This is like 60% of passengers are black women from the periphery. We have to understand what is making them make this choice. Go into a more polluted mode, go into an unsafe, extremely unsafe mode, right? And a mode that they are in fact getting in debt to pay. So we are throwing for an individual effort to access the city, right? Getting that, to access their work, to access their life, to do care work that of course depends a lot on transport. What is it? They are doing it for time, they are doing it for cost, they are doing it for safety. I know it's a strange finding, but it is a safety calculation that they are making. So if we don't pay attention into that, this vision, the motorbikes soon are going to be electric, and this might be the vision that, okay, cities are more accessible and they are clean. Is this the vision that we really want? About 3/4 of our trauma beds in the hospitals now are related to motorcycle crashes. So I think there is a need for us to really understand also what is the reality on the ground, talk to people on the ground, and really qualify our understanding, localize our understanding, and at the same time agree on this vision. What is really we're talking about? This was talked in the previous panel. No, the shared vision is very contested, and Uber thinks they are doing great. So I think really we need to put that into our discussion.
Thank you very much, Clarice. In the interest of time, I'm going to abstain from saying anything. It was fantastic. Bim, so what are you seeing? The IDRC has a large portfolio, isn't it, that stands in different geographies. Perhaps you want to tell us a bit more who the IDRC is first?
Sure.
Yes?
Thanks so much. So IDRC, I work for the IDRC. I'm an environmental economist there.
Closer to you, please.
Oh yeah, so this is the part of the Canadian government. We call ourselves as the Canada's, international development family. So we report to Parliament of Canada through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we have like 5 big program as we talk today, because we have program on the climate food system, mostly the climate smart agriculture. We have program on the global health. And there is also a lot of climate angle there as well. And we have a program on the science education, more on the focus on the AI, a whole bunch of things there. And we have a program on the what we call the democratic and inclusive governance. We're really looking at the whole bunch of women's issue, legal empowerment, so and so on. And my program is basically kind of a low carbon program, if you like. Our focus is more on the how we can assist the global south and the very inclusive low carbon transition, and how we support the transition journey, how you go about, creating the knowledge and the NDC kind of implementation. So we're basically a research funding organization. So we don't do anything in Canada. I mostly work in the global south, almost like 60, 70 countries. And we have been there almost 55 years now. We started in 1970. So we have a huge network of our policy think tanks. We work with the policy think tanks, like a research institution, universities, sometimes government as well. So it's a part of, overall, Canada's part of Canada's foreign development assistance, but we only manage the research funding side of it. So thanks, and we have also started some work with the SLOCAR like last year. I think thanks for inviting us. So we like to be part of the UN Decade on Sustainable Transport. So I'd like to share maybe 2 things here. One is more like something we have been watching very closely, particularly on the data, I think, issue you just raised now, which is very, very important. And second, something, we are aware of it, but we are trying to understand, what this platform is doing right now on the sustainable transport. So the first one, if you look at the data side, like IDRC, we have been doing several program line. Like in COP27, we started loss and damage, kind of, issue at the country level. There's a huge data gap there. Because, how you go about attribution, because you need to link, how climate is linked to loss and damage, how this is different than the disaster kind of thing. So we have a huge challenge there in terms of data. Because without data, the whole this issue of attribution is very hard to make, because, what is linked to climate, what is not linked to climate, what is the slow onset, or what is there's a big issue there. And second, also, we are doing something called Beyond GDP, because there is a movement started by the UN Secretary General back in 2023. If you look at the current GDP, it's really not capturing the decline in the natural capital. So we really would like to come with the kind of alternative way of complementing GDP. How if you count the natural capital, even we discussed with some of our Pacific countries, how your GDP looks like. Again, there is a huge data problem, because data is very fragmented. We have some data from the central banks, mostly economic kind of side of it, and we have a national kind of statistical commission who, also do a lot of things. And we have a country level, World Bank or IMF kind of data. So it's very fragmented, we don't have a single platform that really serve us, to access those data. And also if you look at the NDC, because we're also trying very close to the NDC, because what indicators, is there on the transport? But no, I think it's very hard right now. Although many NDC mention the sustainable transport, but at the same time, I think data is good there. So the few example I like to take, I have been working on the climate finance for the last many years in IDRC. Without really this good data, it's very hard to access climate finance, which is one of the biggest challenge many of our country partners are facing. So in that sense, some of the good example, because we have been following very closely with the initiative by the Asian Development Bank, and then, the AIIB, the Asian
Infrastructure Investment Bank.
Exactly. So they are doing something called the Asia Transport Observatory. So and they are really kind of trying to understand how they can help the countries in terms of like a single data platform. So what they are trying to do, they are starting with a very modest kind of investment, not going huge, at the first place. So they started with the, few indicators. For example, indicators on the, like carbon emission, or like mobility kind of the related data. And the safety kind of issue as well, something I think you highlighted, the motorbike, accident in Brazil, because I have seen that, last few days quite a lot as well. So this is basically 3 areas. One is on the, more on the kind of emission side. What is the, how much carbon actually, our transport system generating at the country level. And second on the, obviously safety issue, and also that kind of how people are accessing the transport system there. So this is kind of a, learning by doing approach, and there is a plan to expand, those indicators in years to come. So once I think country are comfortable, and there's a plan really to kind of expand this. But at the same time, there's a huge capacity gap because many, one of the panelists mentioned already, there's a we're operating in very silos. A lot of, these, there's a lot of huge policy coordinates there. Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Climate. Ministry of Climate talks about the emission, and the Ministry of Transport talk about transport. The finance, I think you mentioned already, and the budgetary allocation. So there's a huge fragmentation, and we are being very sectoral. Last 20 years, we have been talking, let's go economy-wide kind of thinking, but at the same time, we are still very sectoral. So that's a challenge I think we have seen there. And there are some innovation as well. If you look at the data side, we have now some digital innovation, how AI is going to help us on the data. There's a GPS tracking. There is a, like a smart ticketing system. You really can track, some of this data in a real-time kind of manner. Because what is going on today? How many people using the metro in New Delhi or Bombay? So, we have those kind of innovation happening, but they're not still at a scale that we would like to really, bring forward. So I think still there's a lot of work to be done, and particularly from because we are a knowledge-based organization, so we really would like to generate new knowledge, kind of build capacity on that. So I think we really need to have some kind of a very strong capacity building kind of program around sustainable transport, because that's where we see huge gap. And also linking, different actors, Ministry of Finance, again, transport, a whole bunch of things. So that's the one area we're collating, we're watching very, very closely. And as you already know, like, just last my few things on the, what other best practices are there. Like, for example, this transport data commons, I think that's EU Commission, UN Commission in East Africa, or Africa actually. So they are really doing a whole bunch of work around the, creating this data, how we develop the standard and how we develop the, emission and safety standard, something like I already discussed. So the other one I would like to mention the transformative urban mobility initiative. I think BMU, you have been, I see, part of that as well. So that's something we have been watching as well very closely.
Thank you.
What kind of data has been generated there, and how, this more like a Northern European kind of, data system can be, kind of the idea can be, linked to the global south as well. That's the one thing we have been watching as well. And finally, we have this global BTR data. It's a bus rapid transit. I think it was funded by UN. I have to remember that. So they are doing a whole bunch of things in Nigeria, like Lagos, looking at the whole bunch of gender kind of, disaggregated data as well. That's something very important for us, because we really need to understand. Because, mobility is really part of the women's economic empowerment, because without, safety transport, they can be part of the, economic activity. So we are going to link the trade, transport, and then women's economic empowerment. So we're also talking about the more gender disaggregated data. So how women can be safe, when they travel, because we have a lot of, harassment in the public transit.
Thank you.
So this is a very, very important issue for us as well. And my final point around the care economy, because if you look at the unpaired care system around the world, sometimes that is not monetized, and this woman has to sometimes, work very hard to be part of the labor market. And also, to sell their product, transport again is going to be very crucial here, because otherwise they cannot sell their product. So, bringing that care economy angle to the transport discussion is going to be one of our big investment as well. When I say big investment, I'm not talking about like $1 billion here. We are a research funded organization. So really bringing the transport, the mobility, women's kind of economic empowerment, and safety and the data, this is going to be, some of our upcoming work.
Thank
and
you.
we're already starting something with the Sulaka. Let's hope that, we'll be able to work something on that together.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks very
Sorry,
much.
I'm
We
being a little long here, but something I would like to say.
very much appreciated your points, and I think they connect a lot with what Clarissa was also sharing. You're talking about the care economy, the example that Clarissa was saying, black women from the periphery jumping on motorbikes. It has surely to do as well with the fact that women and men move differently when they use a public transport system or when they need to simply access transport. And a lot of it is related to the fact that women still carry the biggest of the share of that caring of that
One
caring
point I
economy.
forgot to mention, like in Myanmar, you know,
I'm going to need to move on at some point, so
Sure,
it's going to be really brief, please, Bin.
Sure,
Yeah?
no. You know, we had some work in Myanmar. I forgot to mention, you know, the gender violence is pretty much linked to transport as well.
Absolutely.
So that's
absolutely.
something you know, we need to very kind of consider as well. Anyway,
Thank you.
that's
Thanks a lot. And when you mention going beyond GDP, I think it resonates so much in the sense that transport should be one of the elements that should be absolutely taken very central to that effort of going beyond GDP about access, isn't it? How many people can actually access reliably public transport? How many people from rural areas can access roads that remain open the entire year? How easy it is or not to move goods around? And what is the price that those final goods get to because of the price of the transport that is at the very source of moving them around. So that is going beyond GDP when you look at it through the transport lens. But let me go now to Mark Mayer from the CUNY Climate Center. You're doing fabulous work on freight transport and logistics, particularly with a very emphasized look on low and middle income countries. But what I wanted to ask you here, Mark, today, it's fantastic that we have global frameworks, whether they are the Paris Agreement, the SDGs, these are coming United Nations Decade of Sustainable Transport. But how do we make the link between those global frameworks and the national delivery of policies that would help us get to the direction these frameworks are setting? What can the United Nations system and other development partners do to make that translation from a global framework to a national reality change happen?
Thanks. And yeah, really happy to answer the question. Really enjoyed, particularly thank you for being here representing countries. That's such an important part of this this conversation. So I'd like to make a few points, and all of them I could go into a lot more detail, but I'll try and kind of flesh out the highlights. I think the first point to remember is that it's the same member states that are negotiating all these different processes, okay? So whether it's disaster risk reduction, or whether it's climate, or whether it's, you know, environment agencies, it's the same member states. And this comes back to the question that was raised at the beginning about member states needing to be able to coordinate themselves internally. It would be great if they can coordinate other stakeholders, cities, regions as well. But actually the reality is that countries are often very, very poor, even just coordinating amongst themselves. So are they speaking with an integrated voice in all these different processes? What, 197 member states of the UN? They're just really not coordinating themselves. So this is a starting point. I think a way to improve the situation would be to have some kind of focal point for transport in the UN system. So someone who has a mandate to kind of look for collaboration, look for synergies. You know, this does not need to be a huge agency, but if someone has a mandate to look out for this. And I think this could be, it could be at a technical level, but also you could imagine a kind of a more high-level political figure who could try and create more cooperation. In particularly, I'd like to point out the fact that there's 3 particular UN agencies that are heavily involved in transport. Many of you might know that the Regional Commission in Europe traditionally has done a lot of the work on transport. Although it's in Geneva, it's in Europe. Often these regulations, these conventions are then transposed in almost every country, right, on dangerous goods, on signs, on vehicle standards, on testing. So they're developed in Geneva, but they're used around the world. So the UNECE, the International Maritime Organization, and the International Civil Aviation. So 3 agencies that are really heavily involved in this topic from the UN. They don't even coordinate themselves. I attended an event at COP29 where they celebrated the fact that they were meeting together for the first time. I mean, this is a complete joke. I'm sorry, this is just completely unsuccessful. So 30 years after these agencies were invited to help on climate, they're celebrated meeting together for the first time. So this is an example of how, you know, we need some macro kind of coordination. The third point I'd make is about, of course, you know, it's easy for us to think about Paris. It's easy for us to think about the SDGs. But actually, there is, you know, looking at all of these topics here on the wall, you know, this is about trade, this is about energy, disaster risk reduction and recovery. It's about resilience, it's about health. So actually, this is way beyond those those few processes we might think of, and this comes back to the need for some kind of facilitation and coordination. You mentioned it in your after you spoke about this economic aspect. I think the economic aspect needs to be really played up. The role of transport in trade and development is so crucial. Freight transport is a vector for development. There's a couple of statistics I will share. So on average, freight and logistics about 12% of GDP, but in some of the lower middle income countries, it's double that, it's 25%. So that's just a massive drain on their economies and the cost of goods and their efficiency. And of course, many of these countries have commodity products that are of a lower value. So actually the commodities from these countries can be 57% more expensive than their competitors because of this inefficiency. And how are these countries supposed to find a trade-led development model? And we're really convinced about this idea that trade is a good thing, brings benefits to both parties, it connects people and gives us access. The other thing I'd say about trade is that we had some work done for us by the University of Zurich, and they calculated that the trade in low carbon goods and products, right? So if we could buy low carbon steel, if we could buy low embedded carbon fruit and vegetables, if this was maximized globally, it would achieve 30% of the emissions reductions we need just from optimizing this trade in low carbon products. Of course, you can't do it at the moment because low carbon steel from Sweden can't be yet produced at the scale that is necessary. And of course, the logistics links to distribute it don't exist. But in theory, if you took the current potential and maximized it, that's already a third just through trade, plus all the other benefits on countries being able to export more of the goods and products where they have a natural competitive advantage from mineral resources or for climate. So this is the economic part. Yeah, the social part we touched on already. This is all about disadvantage, tackling disadvantage. If you don't have access to education, if you don't have access to jobs, this is the baseline for all the other inequalities that can follow. So I play up these other two dimensions. And the last point I'll make, I think, before I stop, is really coming back to the economics. And I think this is probably the most important thing. You spoke about beyond GDP, but even if we just take current conventional economic thinking, you mentioned the 2.7 trillion that's needed. We're subsidizing fossil fuels to the tune of 3 or 4 trillion already. So really just moving that money from subsidizing fossil fuels to other kind of supporting the trade, just using conventional economics would make a lot of sense. And I think the UN system, the development banks and the IMF collectively could really work on this macro problem of the economics of transport. These ideas about a charge on aviation and maritime transport, which could then fund adaptation, fund the transition in these sectors globally. This is the way forward. This is the way, there isn't going to be conventional public money coming to do this, but a fair pricing model where you pay, the polluters pay. If you're running a polluting truck that's causing a lot of road damage, which is creating a lot of health problems in your neighborhood, these people should pay, and that money could then be used for compensating the disadvantage and funding the transition. I see this as the only way forward. The IMF has done good work on this. The UN task force looking at these innovative sources of financing is doing good work. I would really think that they could really collectively drive this discussion, and this is the way we could get the money to fund the investments, fund the solutions, get a little bit more economic justice in the whole thing. That's the way forward. So I'd like to, beyond GDP would be great, but let's just use conventional economics to fix this. I think it's literally madness. The costs of living in a 2.6 or a 4-degree world, apart from all the human suffering that's going to bring, if you just think about economics, the economics of that is just absolutely disastrous. So the idea that we hesitate to pay a few percent of GDP now to create all these massive transitions, which will have huge benefits in health, in equity, it's madness. So really, I would make a big call for them to really make an effort on the economics.
Fantastic, Mark. Thanks very much. So using money better, channeling the money, repurposing money.
The
that
money's
is
there.
already
The money's there.
You mentioned a already rather wow figure of fossil fuel subsidies. If you take both the direct and indirect, It's 7 trillion in
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
2023.
yeah. Well, I was
And we are talking about the investment of cleaning transport solutions being of 2.7 trillion annually. So you got it there, isn't it? You just need to
Yeah, yeah.
repurpose it. And you need to repurpose it to those geographies that are needing it the most, the low and middle income countries, the seeds that are really having already the impacts of climate change in their transport systems and in the daily life. So thank you very much for
Yeah, yeah.
making that point.
And I mean, what is behind all of the disputes here and the failure in global climate policy is this fundamental questions of who's responsible and who's going to pay.
Yeah.
This is really what is behind it. And I think this idea of working on this macroeconomics is a way to break that. Because, of course, a lot of the countries that needing help, need support to adapt, they would be in favor of this. And a lot of other countries would see the natural fairness of this. The polluter will pay, not taxpayers, not public budgets. So I think there's a way through this to actually break this global political impasse. You know, and the ones that are really to stop anything happening will be left on the sidelines.
Thank you very much for that ray of hope as well that you've just put in this last sentence. I'm conscious of time, and I would still like to give our panelists a last round. Keep it brief, if you wouldn't mind, so that way we can keep this fantastic SDGs Pavilion running on time. I think it's our, our return back for having the opportunity of bringing transport discussions to the SDGs Pavilion. This is a bit like a takeaway. So what is that critical thing that you would need to that you think we would need to strengthen to make sure that both climate and sustainability action in transport are better connected? So what is that one critical thing? Thing can be a global action, can be a national action, can be a type of money. You tell me what you like, but what is that critical element that you think should be strengthened so we get a better integrated, a better synergistic sustainability and climate action in the sector? Who would like to start? Yeah, we keep it brief if possible,
exactly.
so that way we still have time to. Thank you.
I'd like to very brief. For me, one strong point would be how we can check transport very strongly in the indices and also the data system. Because without a systematic way of thinking the clean transport, only platform I see the indices, because that's a really hope for us. And also bringing the different ministries together, more economic-wide thinking. Transport is not only sector. I think we really need to talk to, something you mentioned, Minister of Finance, Minister of Industry. So that would be my kind of, vision. Linking, transport mobility, clean mobility with the NDC and defining the targets and bringing the investor actually to this very important area. That's something I would like to push very hard.
So transport robust NDCs implementation.
Exactly.
So
we have
putting
some
it-
NDCs, but we are not happy about
Yes,
it.
yes.
So how we can really develop more indicators, more investment plan in the NDCs, and how we can bring the more investment there.
Fantastic. Thanks, Beam.
I think this is a great point. I was thinking a little bit about what was mentioned before. There is no transport sustainable development going on. I don't think it should be necessarily. I think transport is everywhere. But the fact that it's everywhere, it means it's nowhere as well. It means it's still very invisible. I think if we manage to connect transport better with, I think, both like health and social justice agenda, that really, in particular health, I think this connection, health is normally the sector that in every country has priority, has investment, has a big momentum, has many ministers involved. It's an agenda that really puts everybody on the table. And I think our transport externalities nowadays has so many impacts on health, right? From, of course, air quality, from road safety, but also from the amount that families spend on transport. So that means they don't have enough money to spend on other things that could result in a better quality of life for them. That means lots of families don't access health services because they don't have proper transport, or they don't have enough money to pay for fare. So I think health is very much connected to our agenda, and health normally is an agenda that really has a lot of buy-in and a lot of engagement. I really would like us to learn more from the health sector on the mobilization. The health sector communicates very well. Nobody's against something that is going to improve people's health. So I think this is something, for me, it has been like the whole time, how can we learn from the health sector and really improve our agenda? Because our agenda is very much connected to this, sustain life, right? That's the end.
Fantastic,
Yeah.
Clarice. If you could allow me just to throw some data points there, because you've touched upon such a critical point, and how, of course, transport is connected across all these SDGs. Well, road fatalities are still the #1 killer around the globe for people under 30 years old. And when you look at low and middle income countries, they actually have 60% of the global fleet, but 90% of those deaths. So there is an element there clearly of inequality inside a country and inequality across countries. Transport represents 6% of the air pollution globally. There you are again, air pollution being as well directly related with premature death. And that air pollution, back to Mark's point, is about fossil fuels. It's about the fact that our transport systems are still 95.4% fossil based. A ratio that has not changed over 50 years, 5 decades. And that is directly linked to the rocketing air emissions, CO2 emissions, the air pollution, and so on and so forth, and the health impact. So thank you very much for bringing that connection. So Mark, the critical element to strengthen.
Yeah, I was really struck by the examples you gave from your work, and I think we're on a similar line. I think we need to find a way to link, what I was talking about, these kind of macro discussions about the economics and tax on aviation, etc., with the reality in cities. They weren't making a choice, I guess, because of climate or environment. They were making it based on economics or some perceptions they have about safety or risk. And we need to connect these things. I mean, a lot of it is about the health thing. They're not thinking about their future health or their, And if we need to find a way to connect the things that I spoke about and the things that you talk about. So, I'm one of these hypermobile people. I fly quite a lot. I flew 12 hours to get here. I mean, it's extraordinary. So, why couldn't a charge on my airline ticket, support the public transport in one of these cities you're working on? That's got to be possible. And that's going to be a winning story in terms of action, in terms of public support, in terms of policy, in terms of politics. It's got to be possible. So let's find a way to find a better story connecting these things.
Absolutely.
That's the inspiration you gave me today.
And to your point, financing and funding mobility options that could then, to Clarice's point of how much families have to spend in moving around the globe is around 10 to 15% of household income, families' income goes into paying to move around. In some countries, Turkey goes to 20% of the income of a family. So to Mark's point of how do we make sure that certain users and certain modes are paying for solutions that could help the most move around instead of just a few, isn't it?
If I abuse holding the microphone to make a final point. I mean, this whole system about the UN system failing, people losing faith in governments and politics, it's because these things are not connected. If we could find a way to connect this kind of discussion at this level with these kind of problems and solutions, then, the governments would gain credibility, the UN would regain credibility, and we might kind of turn back to a kind of a positive cycle of public policy discourse.
Thank you so much. Jason, would you like to go next, perhaps? Yeah?
Sure.
Thanks.
Probably for me, it's more on a national level and, PNG context. So I think it's the priority is to really establish a sustainable data management system to monitor progress. I mean, with the system needs to incorporate innovative solutions and incorporate data from the environment, economic, social, all have to be in that system, specifically for the transport. So I think that based on that, then we can make informed decisions and informed policies. Yeah, probably that's it from myself.
Thank you so much, Jason, for that call for data, evidence-based policy making, and with that multidimensional perspective into it. Thanks very much. So, last but not least, our hosts as well, isn't it? The government of Brazil. So what is that critical element that, Thiago, you think needs to be strengthened so we connect better the climate and the sustainability action in the transport system?
It's a difficult question. I'm happy that everyone has a different question, so we have a composed answer. But during our discussion, I was remembering a video from Carl Sagan explaining to the Congress in the US how climate change works and what are the impacts in 1985. I'm from 86, so I didn't get that video. I wasn't born there. So what I mean is the information is, we have all the information we need. I think we need action, right? So we need to go forward, and I really hope that the UN Decade for Sustainable Transport is also the decade for climate action at the transport sector. So we have problems and difficulties with data. We have social actions that need to be done to climate justice, to a just transition. We have financing problems. Maybe the money is not where it needs to be. But all of these problems, we must take action in spite of them. We must have different ways to do it. And this is also something that different realities, different countries are going to do differently. There's no way that everybody's going to have the same pathway. We live in Brazil, we know that things are difficult. And for you are in Brazil, you can see for yourselves. But we need action. Everybody, every country, every municipality, every state government needs to act on their land, on their territory, and that's it, a call for action.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Thiago. I cannot see a better way to pass it on to our colleague from ESCAP, Wei Shui Eng. This segment of this morning has been co-organized jointly by us, ESCAP and SLOCAT, and as always, it's a privilege to work with them. They are supporting countries in a region of the world that is very much at the first, forefront of all these challenges and all these opportunities as well that we are seeing. So Wei Shui, would you come here and help us close what's been going on this morning? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marisha, and thank you so much for our dear panelists who have shared your insights and your valuable comments. And I think this will all help us move forward. We will try to collect some of the key messages and to reflect in future discussions as well. And so, as you're all aware, ESCAP is committed to this resolution. We are working very closely with our colleagues at DESA, as well as all the regional commissions, and also supporting all our member states to really help them transition to a more sustainable and inclusive and resilient transport future. But we do know that countries are different, and there's no one single approach to sustainable transport. Within our region in Asia and Pacific, we have seen diverse priorities and challenges, and also today we've heard from some of our member states, so Punjab, Pakistan, and also from Papua New Guinea, and also insights from Brazil, to really understand that there are different challenges across different countries, even within the same region. However, I think it is very enlightening to know that there is a shared goal and a common future that can help us move forward to the vision that we all hope for our sustainable transport sector. And of course, moving forward, ESCAP is very much committed to this process. And we do want to ensure that developing countries and those with special situations, such as seeds or landlocked developing countries, will be given special attention, and to ensure that their specific challenges and capacities will be fully addressed. And we've also heard from many speakers today about the importance of aligning this global process of the decade of sustainable transport to other perhaps regional and global policy frameworks and national climate commitments, as well as transport actions. So I think this is something that the implementation plan will hope to achieve and to reflect, and to really highlight some of the key actions moving forward. And we do believe that establishing such connections will help elevate the importance of sustainable transport within broader national development and climate agendas, while aligning it with other existing frameworks and policy initiatives. And I just want to highlight lastly that at ESCAP we have organized a consultation meeting in July with all our member states on the implementation plan for the decade of sustainable transport. And one of the key outputs from that meeting is that our member states have strongly agreed that it is very important to shape a coherent and forward-looking agenda from the region, from Asia and the Pacific, and to align our regional initiatives with the global implementation plan. So it's not just about national commitments, but we do hope to also highlight the importance of regional initiatives. And also, we do hope to continue working with our developed partners, including SLOCAT, DESA, and of course our regional commissions, to further help support member states through capacity building, technical assistance, and intergovernmental platforms. So with that, I thank you all for your participation, and I do look forward to further collaboration. Thank you.